Hey everyone, welcome back. This is our weekly encouragement, strategy, and coaching call. Last week, we spent time talking about isolation and humility, how pressure quietly isolates leaders, how it doesn't usually happen all at once, it happens gradually. We carry more responsibility, we experience frustrations and disappointments, creating more pressure, and we stop asking for help. We begin believing nobody else really understands the weight we're carrying. And over time, that pressure and our reactions isolate us. We also talked about how humility interrupts isolation. Humility allows us to step back and ask, what role am I playing here? What am I missing? What can I learn? As I reflected on that conversation this week, I realized something. Leaders are also shaped by how they manage conflict in their teams, conflicts at home, conflicts within the organization, and conflicts in how we interpret people. And if humility helps interrupt isolation, then perhaps grace is what helps us navigate conflict. Because pressure has a way of hardening people, making us quicker to judge, quicker to assign motive, quicker to move people into categories they may not belong in. So today I want to talk about grace under pressure and not the way we usually think about it. Most people hear that phrase and think how somebody performs under pressure. But I want to flip it. I want to think the deeper question is who do we become under pressure? And more importantly, what helps us avoid becoming harder, harsher, and more isolated? A local community leader passed away recently. A strong voice, strong opinions, thoughtful, deeply committed to causes she cared about. And candidly, we disagreed often. On many issues, we found ourselves on opposite sides, sometimes very opposite sides. But over time, we developed something I deeply respected: trust, not because we agreed, but because we learned how to disagree. We could have candid conversations, hard conversations, push back on one another, challenge ideas, argue our perspectives, and yet somehow it didn't become personal. As I reflected on her passing, I found myself asking, why did that relationship work? Especially in a world where disagreement so quickly becomes division. And I realized something. At some level, we had to extend grace to one another. Not agreement, grace. For me, grace looks like this. I choose to believe she's approaching her position in good faith, even when I strongly disagreed with how she arrived there. I didn't reduce her to an issue. I did not assume bad intent. I did not villainize her because she saw the world differently. And honestly, I think this quality has become increasingly rare, not just in public discourse, but in our organizations, our leadership teams, and even at home. We still need strong arguments. The issues that matter deserve conviction, but leadership requires us to understand something. We're not going to convince everyone, and that's okay. Because trust doesn't require agreement. It does require us to resist the temptation to villainize people we disagree with. Because over time, that damages trust, culture, relationships. And if we're honest, it damages us. This is one of the reasons the four types of relationship framework in the trust transformation matters. In the mini course available in our community classroom, we teach the most relationships generally exist in one of four conditions. Advocates, these are people that actively champion you and support you. Allies, these are people generally supportive and collaborative. Agnostics are the people who are neutral, uncertain, or simply not yet connected. And adversaries, these are people where trust may be broken, conflict exists, or alignment is strained. And I want to be very clear. These are not labels. They are not judgments. They are not categories of good or bad people. They are simply conditions of the relationship, and conditions can change. Here's what I've learned. You can't accurately assess the condition of relationship without first extending grace because pressure distorts perception. Pressure narrows empathy. Pressure makes us assume motive, and pressure moves people too quickly into adversary, when in reality, they may simply be overwhelmed, uncertain, frustrated, or operating from different assumptions. They're trying imperfectly. And grace creates a pause. The pause asks, what if I'm misreading this? What if trust, not agreement, is the real issue? What conversation have I avoided? What role am I playing in contributing to this? That pause matters because pause creates space for grace. This isn't just some philosophical idea. There's actually strong research behind this. Research in neuroscience and social psychology consistently shows that stress narrows empathy and increases threat perception. In simple terms, when pressure rises, we become more likely to assume negative intent. We become less curious. We become more reactive. We become more emotionally rigid. Researchers studying stress and perspective taking have found that under pressure, people become less able to accurately interpret the motives of others and more likely to view situations through a threat lens. And leaders experience this constantly. A disagreement becomes, they're against me. Silence becomes, they must disagree. Resistance becomes, they don't care. And sometimes the truth is much simpler. People are overwhelmed. They may be afraid. They may be trying very hard and not yet acting in a way that aligns with what we believe. Grace provides space for forgiveness, and there's also compelling research around forgiveness and emotional well-being. The Stanford Forgiveness Project and research referenced by organizations like the Mayo Clinic consistently show that forgiveness and emotional release can reduce stress, lower anxiety, and improve emotional well-being and strengthen relationships. I want to be clear. Forgiveness does not mean excusing poor behavior. It means refusing to carry the emotional weight forever. There's important research on self-compassion that extends from grace. Dr. Kristen Neff's work has shown that people who extend grace toward themselves after mistakes tend to recover faster, demonstrate greater resilience, and make better decisions under pressure. Translated into leadership language, grace helps leaders recover from conflict, from disappointment, from mistakes, and relieving the pressure that they're under. Findings from our own trust transformation research reinforce this idea. When our participants began intentionally practicing trust-centered behaviors, one of the consistent outcomes we saw was a noticeable shift in how they interpreted relationships, approached conflict, and responded under pressure. People reported stronger communication, healthier relationships, greater confidence, and improved emotional well-being. In many ways, what emerged was something closer to a new operating system for how people responded. And here's the distinction. Grace does not remove accountability, it removes bondage. Think about your world right now. Who have you prematurely moved into an adversary role at work, at home, on your team, or in the community? Where has pressure distorted your perception? Which relationship might deserve a conversation instead of an assumption? Where do you need to assume good faith? And perhaps the harder question, where do you need to extend grace to yourself? Because leaders under pressure often become hardest on themselves. Mistakes become identity, regret becomes weight, But grace says, I am not defined by my worst moments. There's a piece of wisdom in scripture that has stayed with me for years. The book of James reminds us to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. This is leadership wisdom, especially under pressure. Pressure hardens people. I've seen it happen in organizations, marriages, teams, in the public discourse. And if we're honest with ourselves, grace can soften that pressure that tries to harden us. Grace helps us disagree without destroying trust. Grace helps us pause before assigning motive. Grace helps us move relationships forward. And perhaps most importantly, grace helps us lead with greater clarity, greater confidence, and more peace at work and at home. And with that, I'd love to open it up and ask what stands out to you most in this idea of grace?